When the autopsy knife touched her skin for the first time, the little girl's finger twitched, and the doctor's world stopped. Subscribe and turn on notifications before you start. Watch this miracle until the very end, and write in the comments what you would have done if you were there. The night was thick, almost moonless. The road to San Pedro del Valle seemed to swallow up the old car that cut through the wind. Inside, the sound of the engine mixed with Miguel Rosa's desperate sobs. "She'll be fine. She'll be fine. You hear me?" he said, not believing what he was saying. Rosa, in the back seat, turned around, holding the cold little hand of her daughter Lucia. "My love, talk to me, please. Mommy is here." The girl didn't move. Her face was pale, her lips purple. Rosa trembled, feeling her heart leap out of her mouth. The car's headlights flickered. Rain began to fall, sliding down the glass. Miguel gripped the steering wheel tightly, his eyes filled with tears. "I should have fixed this damn car before. Just a little more, daughter. Hold on." The speedometer climbed. Each curve seemed tighter than the last. The tires scraped on the wet pavement. Outside, everything was shadow. Inside, only despair. Rosa tried to stay calm, but her voice came out broken. "Miguel, please slow down. You're nervous. We'll get there, but slowly. There's no time." Lucia is fading. A thunderclap split the sky. The sound made Lucia shudder a little, and for a second, Rosa thought she had reacted. Look, she moved. Miguel moved. "Daughter, Lucia." He looked in the rearview mirror with tears falling. "My God, talk to me, daughter, please." But the girl remained still again. The car continued forward. The rain grew stronger. The windshield wipers beat nervously, like Rosa's heart. She prayed softly, "Hail Mary, full of grace. Protect my little girl. Don't let her go." Miguel bit his lip, trying to hold back the tears. "I can't lose Rosa. I can't. Forgive me, daughter." Suddenly, a headlight appeared in the opposite direction. Miguel turned the steering wheel with all his might. The car skidded. The sound of the tires scraping the asphalt was the last warning before the crash. A loud thud, then silence. The car came to a standstill. Smoke rose from the dented hood. The radio played distant music interrupted by static. Rosa still held her daughter's hand. Her face was pressed against the seat, blood running down her forehead. "Lucia, my love," she whispered weakly. Miguel tried to breathe, but no air came. He looked back one last time. "Hold on, my daughter. Please." The rain fell harder. No sound except hers. No movement except the cold or entering the car, taking away what little warmth was left. The wheels of the stretcher squeaked down the empty hallway. The sound was as if the entire building was breathing heavily. One nurse pushed, another opened doors with his shoulder. The white sheet covered the small body, so small that it seemed like a mistake that it was there. In the plastic, tied to the foot. A crumpled piece of paper, lifeless girl, fatal accident, time, place, hasty signature, nothing else. "Sign here, doctor," said the morgue employee in a low voice without looking. Andres took the folder. The pen failed. He scratched. He read the envelope again. He breathed slowly as if trying to swallow a stone. "Age," he murmured. "7, that's what they brought," replied the nurse to the mother. They took her to another hospital. The father didn't survive. Silence. The clock on the wall ticked, 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 cutting through the cold air. Andres nodded without saying anything, and the team left, letting the door close slowly. The metal of the table shone under the white light. The strong smell of disinfectant mixed with a little gasoline that still came from the fabric of the clothes in the pocket of the dress, dirt from the road. He stood still for a moment, looking at the sheet. His chest tightened. He had a silly urge to apologize for everything, for being there, for not having arrived sooner, for not having words. "I'm sorry, little one," he whispered, almost without a voice. "I'll do it right, I promise." He removed the sheet carefully, as if waking someone from their sleep. The girl's face appeared so still, a slight bruise on her forehead, a scratch on her nose, eyelashes stuck together with dried tears, her skin pale but with a little color on her cheeks, as if she had been running in the schoolyard a short time ago. Andres checked the sheet again, as if new lines were about to appear there. They didn't appear. Lifeless girl. That hurt like an accusation. He closed his eyes for a second and saw an old flash, a memory that always came back. He pushed the image away, took a deep breath, and walked. The faucet screeched. He washed his hands slowly, feeling the cold water hit his skin. He scrubbed his fingers, his nails, his wrists. The soap smelled like a hospital and reminded him of a sunless morning. The water ran down her arms and dripped onto the floor. 1 drop, 2, 3. She dried herself with paper and put on her gloves. The snap of the latex sounded like a small gunshot in the silence. "Come on," she said softly, just to herself. He turned on the lamp. The circle of light fell directly on the small chest. The marks from the journey were slight. There was no blood spattered, just those blows that speak softly. Andres adjusted the girl's head, aligned her shoulders, touched her hair, removed a strand from her face with his fingertips. The touch sent a chill down his neck. "You should be asleep in your bed now," he said in a whisper. "Not here." He returned to the sink and checked the instruments. Scissors, tweezers, shiny steel, a new scalpel still sealed in its bag. He carefully opened the plastic and placed it on the tray, neatly aligned. He paused for a long time, looking at the metal reflecting the light almost like an eye. The clock continued to tick, and the refrigerator in the background hummed softly. Andres pulled the mask up over his face. The elastic band hit his ear and hurt a little, but he didn't care. He put alcohol on the gloves. The smell rose strongly, filling his lungs. His heart was beating fast, and he knew it wasn't just because of the work. It was something else he didn't know how to name. He approached the table and stopped on the left side of the body, as he always did. He remembered the steps in his head out of habit, organizing each movement as if ordering could prevent the chaos that had already happened. "Lifeless girl," he repeated, but his voice failed him. "That's what the paper says. That's what the paper says." He reached out and touched the skin on the shoulder first. It was cold, but not frozen, a cold that still remembered the heat. His thumb remained there, still, as if testing reality. Then he touched the forearm. The skin felt soft under the glove. That was when he felt it. It wasn't the normal warmth of someone who had just arrived. It was another kind of warmth, a stubborn warmth hidden like embers under ashes. Andres slowly removed his finger as if he had been startled. Silently, he looked at the lamp as if the light could explain it. It explained nothing. He touched it again, now with his whole palm. The cold of the metal of the table rose, but the skin had a remnant of summer. "How strange," he murmured. "It's strange." The air became heavy. He pulled a chair with his foot without sitting down, his head tilted on its own. He listened attentively to a silence filled with small noises. The refrigerator, the clock, the buzzing of the light bulb. His hand, still on the girl's arm, felt a warmth that did not match the sheet. Something inside him trembled, a slight but deep tremor. "I'm nervous, that's all," he said, trying to convince himself. It was early morning, and his fatigue had passed. He ran his fingers over her skin again, with a tenderness that had no place in a cold room. A desire to call the girl by a name he didn't even know. A desire to say, "Stay," and at the same time, a silly fear of speaking and hearing his own voice break. Andres withdrew his hand and felt the emptiness that remains when one lets go of something important. He looked again, at the tray. The scalpel was still there, clean and ready. He took it firmly. The cold metal fit into his glove as if searching for a truth. It was another long dawn, one more among so many, but something inside him told him that it was not the same as the others. "Let's go," he murmured softly, as if asking for permission. The metal tip approached the girl's chest. A thread of light reflected off the scalpel, cutting through the shadow that covered his face. Andres kept his hand steady and his gaze fixed. The first cut would be small and precise, just the beginning of a procedure he had performed hundreds of times before. But the moment the scalpel touched the skin, something impossible happened. The body moved. It was slight, a tremor, an almost invisible spasm, but enough to freeze the air in the room. The scalpel slipped from his fingers, grazed the girl's arm, and fell to the floor with a that sounded too loud. Andres stood still, his heart racing. "No, it can't be," he whispered, his voice trembling. He looked at the girl's arm. The muscle was still vibrating, a slight contraction, as if life refused to leave. His gaze scanned her entire body, not knowing if he was seeing or dreaming. His mind screamed that it was impossible, but his whole body said the opposite. "My God," he breathed with difficulty, trembling. "What is this?" He approached slowly, without blinking. He stretched out his hand and touched the small arm again. The skin was warm, not the warmth of a newborn, but a living warmth that rose to his own wrist. Andres' heart was beating so hard, it almost hurt. He felt his throat close up. "This isn't possible," he said, his eyes filled with tears. "It can't be." Without thinking, he put his ear to the girl's chest. The silence in the room disappeared. Only that moment existed, the sound of his own heartbeat mingling with another faint but real one, a soft, insistent, almost shy thump, thump. He opened his eyes wide. Andres murmured in a broken voice, "That's it. That's a heart." He stood motionless, breathless, his lips trembling. He pressed his ear closer, his eyes filling with tears again. Thump, thump, like a heartbeat asking for help. "My God," he whispered, his voice breaking. "She's alive." She took a step back, tripping over her own shadow. Her whole body was shaking. For a moment, she didn't know what to do. Then her medical instinct took over from the shock. She ran to the panel and pressed the emergency button. "I need help here," she shouted, her voice echoing through the corridors. Now he turned on the oxygen, connected the respirator, checked the pupils, the pulse, everything. Every touch was a mixture of desperation and faith. "Come on, little one, breathe. Listen to me," he said, panting. "Stay with me. Stay with me." The door burst open. Two frightened nurses entered. "Doctor, what's going on?" asked one, approaching the table. Andres pointed with trembling hands. "She's alive. Her heart is beating." The nurses looked at each other in disbelief. One of them put his fingers on the girl's neck, checked her pulse, and turned pale. "I'm sorry," he stammered. "It's weak, but it's there." Andres pushed the stretcher hard. "Quick, take her to the ICU," he shouted, as the sound of the wheels screeched down the hallway. The lights flickered as they ran. The small body moved under the sheet. The monitors were connected in a hurry. One nurse turned on the oxygen. Another opened the IV. The sound of hurried footsteps mixed with the shouts of orders. "Bring the defibrillator. Call pediatrics. Careful with the tube." Andres ran alongside the stretcher, his gown open, hitting his legs. His heart seemed to beat outside his chest. Memories of his lost daughter flashed through his mind, like flashes of pain and hope. They reached the intensive care unit. The noise of the machines filled the air. The smell of alcohol, plastic, life, and death mixed together. They put the girl on the bed and connected the cables, the monitors. The screen flashed a trembling but living line. "Come on, little one, you can do it," Andres whispered, squeezing her hand tightly. "Don't give up. Not now." A long beep, then another. The monitor began to mark a rhythm. Her chest rose slowly. Andres took a deep breath, tears falling without him realizing it. "That's it. That's it, girl. Keep going." The nurses looked at each other in disbelief. One of them made the sign of the cross. "This is a miracle. A miracle," said the doctor, his voice breaking. Andres didn't respond, just kept his hand on hers, feeling the warmth return, his eyes filled with tears, his chest heavy, a silent prayer on his lips. Meanwhile, in another hospital, a woman was waking up from a deep faint. Her body ached, her head throbbed. She looked around, confused. "Lucia," she whispered hoarsely. "Where's my daughter?" The room was dim, with only a soft light near the bed. The air smelled of alcohol and new plastic. The beeping of the machines came like a quiet whisper from afar. Remembering that every second counted, Andres stood by her side, looking at her small face, the tube, the tapes, the bandage on her temple. And then he saw it under the gauze, almost hidden by the sheet, a thin chain, glistening. He moved it carefully with 2 fingers, as if removing dust from a baby's face. Of a baby, a simple silver cross, without any luxury. Behind the cross was a very small plaque with a name engraved on it. He brought his eyes closer. "Lucia." The word formed roundly in his mouth without sound. He repeated it inside as if praying. "Lucia. Lucia." The silver was warm, It was like having a little sun in the midst of so much cold. "That's your name," he whispered hoarsely. "Lucia." His hand trembled, not from fear or caution. He passed the tip of her finger over the letter L very slowly, as if she could touch the person who put that necklace there. She imagined the gestures of a mother lowering her daughter's head, closing the chain with her fingernail, kissing her on the forehead, and saying, "There, now you're protected." A simple scene, but that was what her heart saw. "I'm going to take care of you, little one," he said softly with a tired smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I won't let them erase you." He looked around. No one was there, just him and the constant beeping. Carefully, he unclasped the necklace. He was afraid of breaking the silence, but he didn't. The cross came off Lucia's neck slowly, without scratching her skin. He held the cross in his palm for a moment, wondering whether or not he should keep it. The doubt came with a pain in his chest, that old pain that sometimes returned without warning. He took a deep breath and followed his instinct, putting the necklace in the inside pocket of his gown, the one over his heart. "It's fine here. Stay with me for a while," he murmured. "I promise I'll return it." He pulled the sheet up to the girl's chin and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. Then he ran his hand through the air above her forehead, without touching her, as if giving her a blessing. He wanted to say more, but couldn't find the words, so he remained silent beside her, just listening to the music from the machines. A nurse came in, checked the numbers, and looked up. "Everything's stable for now, doctor." Andres nodded. "Thanks, Javier. Write her name on the board. Lucia is important, but the file arrived without—" "I know. Write it down anyway." He cut him off calmly. "I saw it on her necklace." The nurse wrote with a blue pen, "Lucia," neat and real. Andres felt that made a difference, as if giving that bed back a name, also restoring a piece of dignity. "Let me know immediately if there are any changes," he said. "Right away," Javier replied. Andres left the emergency room and walked to the administrative office. The light inside was brighter, even harsh. On the table were piles of papers, folders with rubber bands, stamps. The clock ticked impatiently. He sat down, opened the manila envelope that came with the body, and took everything out: the case report, the coroner's guide, and ambulance form. He wrote down 0317 on a piece of paper. The time he remembered the scalpel falling. He wanted to understand the timeline, like someone putting together a broken vase. He started with the police report, writing quickly, hurriedly, leaving spaces blank. The patient's address field was empty. Family contacts, signature of the person responsible, a short scribble with no full name, no officer's badge number, no car registration number. He frowned. "Where is the rest?" he said in a low voice. He turned the pages. The third did not follow the first. The second was missing. The fourth seemed to be a copy of the first, as if someone had duplicated it and stapled it badly. The date on the stamp was blurred. It was unclear whether it said 02 or 03 of the month. Time, 001. The hyphen covered the minute. He took the ambulance guide found with no vital signs at the scene of the accident. Response time, found and written on top, arrival at the hospital. 1:40, departure to the coroner. 1:55, 15 minutes, 15. Andres felt his stomach turn. 15 minutes, he repeated, shifting in his chair. Who sends a girl's body to the coroner? In 15 minutes, he opened another folder. No family address, no mother's contact information, only mother taken to hospital. No hospital name, father a line, and a crooked stamp that said coroner. The entrance looked more like an office than a care facility. They knocked on the door. It was the night receptionist wearing a sweatshirt under his gown. "Doctor, do you need anything?" Andres replied without raising his voice. "Peace. And who received these papers when the body arrived?" "It was the previous shift. I just signed the hourly entry." "And where are the missing pages?" The receptionist shrugged his shoulders, somewhat embarrassed. "They didn't come, doctor. It sometimes happens." "It shouldn't happen," he said dryly but without anger. He took a deep breath, controlling his tone. "Did you see the ambulance that brought him?" "Yes, doctor. It arrived quickly, without sirens. The driver was nervous. He wanted to finish quickly. He said it was fatal." "Of course, fatal," he repeated, savoring those words. "And who signed that?" "Himself. But the handwriting." The receptionist spread his hands as if to say, "I don't know. Do you want me to try to call?" Andres looked at the pile of papers and his pocket where the cross seemed to Lucia thought. She didn't answer right away. She picked up the report again, reread it, and wrote down on a piece of paper, no address, no full signature, no page 2, time to the coroner, 15 minutes. Next to it, he was writing when the door creaked and Nurse Paloma entered with a chart. "Doctor, the ICU is asking for confirmation of identification. Her bracelet only says female, NN. Change it," she said firmly. "Write Lucia and put NN as an observation, but write the name, please." "Yes, doctor." Paloma looked at his face for a second. Something happened. She looked down at the papers. "Everything is strange, very fast. A case like this doesn't move so easily. Things are missing. It's disrespectful." Paloma nodded, feeling the weight of her words. "You always say that papers tell a story. This story is incomplete, right?" "Yes," he replied tiredly. "And when it's incomplete, someone suffers twice." Paloma left and closed the door carefully. Andres was left alone with the table and the stamps. He ran his hand over his face, feeling his beard scratch his fingers. He took a yellow marker and underlined the gaps as if setting off an alarm. The more he read, the greater the emptiness grew. It wasn't just a mistake. It was haste. It was a get it out of here that he had seen before and always hurt. He wrote Lucia at the top of a blank sheet of paper. Below, he wrote what he knew and what was unknown. Girl, 7 years old, arrives as deceased, signs of life detected at 0003:17. She paused. Mother's address and phone number unknown. Origin of report, patrol number, page 2. He looked in his pocket, took out the necklace, and placed it on the sheet. The cross glistened under the cold light. The name tag seemed to look back at her. "I won't let them erase you, little one," she said more firmly now, neither on paper nor off it. She carefully put the necklace back, arranged the folders, and recorded what he could. Wrote notes with question marks on the last one, wrote "Why so fast?" Stuck it in the center of the sheet, more official than a finger in the chest of someone who wasn't there to answer. The receptionist peeked through the door again. "Doctor, if you want, I can check the ambulance reception radio logs. Maybe they have the report number." Andres looked at him with quiet gratitude. "Please check and write down everything. Every detail. Clear. Yes, again. Silence again. The clock again. The ticking again. And underneath it all, deep down in the hospital, a constant, timid, stubborn beeping, reminding him that there was life." He closed his eyes for a moment and rested his forehead on his fingertips. Andres said, like a promise, "I'm here, I'm watching, and I won't let them forget you." In another hospital not far from there, the room was too white. The smell of ether mixed with the sound of the machines made it seem as if time had stopped. Rosa opened her eyes slowly, her vision blurred. First she saw the ceiling, then the bright light, and finally the thick bandage on her arm. She tried to move, but a sharp pain shot through her body and up to her chest. The air escaped in a moan. "Calm down, ma'am. Calm down," said a soft male voice. A nurse approached, adjusting the IV. "You had an accident. You're safe now." Rosa turned her face, trying to understand where she was. Her throat was dry, her head felt heavy, and her heart was beating fast. She brought her hand to her chest, as if searching for something, and suddenly her eyes widened. "My daughter," she whispered. "Where is my daughter?" The nurse hesitated, looking at the paper at the foot of the bed, then at the hallway, as if waiting for someone to come and answer for him. Rosa noticed the silence and insisted, her voice rising in a thread of desperation. "My daughter, Luke. She was with me in the car. She was in the back seat. Her breathing became short. Please tell me she's okay." The nurse took a deep breath, trying to find the words. "Ma'am, you'd better rest for now. The doctor will come to talk to you later." "No," she shouted hoarsely. "I want to see my daughter now." She tried to get up, but her body wouldn't respond. The pain returned, cutting through her abdomen. The nurse held her by the shoulders. "Please don't strain yourself. You need to stay calm." Her eyes filled with tears and looked straight at him. "Listen to me, please." "I felt her," she said, pointing to her chest. "I felt her heart here before I passed out. She's breathing. She's alive." The man looked away, uncomfortable. He was used to this. Mothers who woke up and didn't want to accept it. He had seen it before. Too much pain, too little truth. But the way Rosa spoke, the firmness, the trembling of her hands, the desperate gleam in her eyes, made it seem as if somehow she knew. "Mrs. Rosa," he tried to say in a low voice. "The accident was serious. The ambulance brought her in unconscious, with serious injuries. The team did everything they could, but..." She interrupted him with a firm look. "Say it. Speak." He swallowed hard. "The girl was taken to another ward." Rosa grabbed his arm tightly. "Then take me to her, please?" The nurse flinched, trying to pull his hand away. I can't, ma'am. I don't have permission. You have to wait for the doctor." "Permission?" Her voice broke. "I'm her mother. She's my daughter. She needs me." Tears began to fall one after another, soaking the pillow. "Do you understand what that means?" I heard her cry before everything went dark. The man stood still, without response, only feeling a lump in his throat. Those words hurt differently. It didn't seem like denial. It was like faith, a faith that didn't know how to die. Rosa covered her face with her hands, trembling. She remained silent for a moment, breathing heavily. The beeping of the monitor remained constant, as if marking the rhythm of her despair. When she was able to speak again, her voice came out weak, broken, but full of certainty. I know she's alive. A mother can feel it." She looked directly into the nurse's eyes, and I felt it. He tried to hide the chill that ran down his spine. He looked down his gaze and adjusted the IV, just to have something to do. "Please," she repeated more calmly, almost in a whisper. "Take me to her. I just want to see her little face for a minute, that's all." The man remained silent. He knew he couldn't. He also knew that the doctor would probably say it was impossible, but something in her voice made his heart heavy. "I'll call the doctor," he murmured, with a look of compassion. "Just don't get up. He'll be right back." He left carefully, closing the door behind him. The sound of the handle echoed in the room. Rosa was left alone. The walls seemed to close in on her. The air smelled of disinfectant and sadness. She turned her head and saw a tray with a glass of water half full. She tried to take it, but her hand was shaking too much. She put it down, looked at the ceiling, and began to pray in a low voice. "My God, please don't take her away from me. If she is suffering, give me her pain, but don't take her away from me. Don't take her away." Tears fell slowly, dripping through her hair stuck to her skin. For a moment, everything was silent. Only the sound of the monitor continued, and in the midst of that silence, Rosa felt a warmth in her chest. Slight, small, but real. A feeling she couldn't explain. "I know you're alive," she whispered again, with her eyes closed. "I felt you, my love. I felt you." And she lay there crying softly, while the wind from the window gently moved the sheet, as if someone somewhere was breathing with her. It was still early morning when Rosa opened her eyes again. The room was in darkness. The half-open window let in the distant sound of soft rain hitting the leaves outside. The pain in her ribs was still strong, but her heart was beating with an urgency she could no longer bear. The clock read almost 3 in the morning. She looked at her, but then she looked at the door and made up her mind. She pulled the needle out of her arm with a sharp tug. Blood trickled down in a thin stream, but she didn't feel it. Fear was replaced by something else, a desperate, vivid urgency. She took the blouse that was on the chair and slowly put it on with difficulty. She got up, staggering. The hospital hallway was empty. The dim lights flickered. The floor was cold under her bare feet. A nurse was sleeping, leaning against the wall, and she passed by silently. Every step hurt, but she didn't stop. "I'm coming, my girl," she whispered to herself with a trembling voice. "Mom's coming. Hang in there." Outside, the city seemed asleep. The icy wind hit her hard as she left through the side door, hunching her body. She took a taxi that was parked near the emergency room entrance. The driver, an old man with a cap, looked at her suspiciously in the rearview mirror. "Are you okay, ma'am? You look hurt. Take me to the central coroner's office," she said, panting. "Please." He looked at her for a moment, but the urgency in her voice was stronger than any doubt. He started the car in silence. The wet street reflected the yellow lights of the pink lampposts. She clutched the seat, her gaze fixed on the window, her lips moving silently. She prayed, she asked, she promised. "She's alive," she murmured. "I know. I felt it." The driver looked at her in the rearview mirror, not understanding. "Did you lose someone?" She took a deep breath, her eyes filled with tears. "Not yet." The car stopped in front of an old building with high walls and barred windows. The sign said Medical Forensic Institute. Rosa got out before the car came to a complete stop. She ran, stumbling over her own feet. The entrance was cold, too brightly lit. A half-asleep guard got up from his chair. "Ma'am, you can't come in at this hour." "I need to see my daughter," she cried, unable to hold back her tears. "They brought her in from the accident in San Pedro. Her name is Lucia Herrera. Please." The man tried to calm her down, but she broke free, pushing open the door. Her tears were already mixing with the rain dripping from her hair. The corridors of the medical examiner's office were long, smelling of formaldehyde and metal. The lights buzzed. Every closed door seemed to scream her daughter's name. She walked, looking into the rooms, calling, "Lucia! Lucia! It's me, daughter!" No answer. She turned right, her heart racing, her body weak. She reached the main room. It was empty. The stretcher was cold, the sheet white, everything too neat. No body, no sound. Rosa stood still, not understanding, breathing short. She looked around, lost, feeling the floor disappear. "No, it can't be," she murmured in a broken voice. "She was here. They told me she was here." She took 2 steps forward, staggering, and touched the stretcher with her fingertips. The cold metal sent a shiver through her. "Lucia, my girl, where are you, my love?" Her voice was lost in the emptiness. All she could hear was the dripping of a faucet in the distance. It was then that, at the end of the hallway, she saw a shadow move. A man in a white coat, with his back to her, was holding something small in his hands, looking closely at the reflection. The light flashed, and she recognized the silver glint. It was the cross, the necklace, her daughter's necklace. Rosa's body reacted before her mind did. She ran, stumbling, tears already falling. "Sir!" she cried, breaking the silence. That cross belongs to my little girl." Andres turned around, surprised, his face tired, his gown stained with sweat. For a second, he didn't understand. "You?" he asked, confused. "You're her mother?" Rosa tried to answer, but she couldn't breathe. The floor spun, her legs couldn't hold her up. "My daughter," was all she managed to say before the world went dark. Andres ran, dropped the necklace, and caught her before she fell to the floor. Her body was light, fragile, as if made of pain and wind. He hugged her, saying, "Ma'am, hey, listen to me, ma'am." But she didn't respond. The room was silent, with that yellow light that makes pain feel slower. The sound of the monitor marked time, a beep every second, reminding her that her heart was still beating slowly, but beating. Rosa opened her eyes with difficulty. Her face hurt, her body felt heavy, and memories of what had happened came back in pieces. First, the noise of the car, then the cold, and finally the emptiness. She tried to move, but a pain shot through her chest. She looked around in confusion until a soft voice broke the silence. Calm down, don't move yet." She turned her face slowly. Andres was sitting next to the bed, his eyes tired but steady. He held her hand carefully, as if afraid that any movement would break it. Where am I?" she asked in a hoarse voice. "In the hospital," he replied. "They found you in the morgue. You fainted." She blinked, trying to understand what she was hearing. "In the morgue?" "Yes." He took a deep breath. "But now you're safe." The silence that followed was heavy. Rosa closed her eyes, and for a moment thought it was all still a dream, until she remembered. She remembered the necklace, the cross, his face, his gaze when she screamed. "You whispered with tears in your eyes. You were wearing my daughter's necklace." Andres nodded slowly and squeezed her hand a little tighter. "Yes, I saw her." He paused and took a deep breath. "Your daughter is alive, but she's still fighting for a second." Rosa stopped breathing. Her eyes filled with tears. Her whole body was shaking. "What did you say? Alive?" she asked, almost without a voice. "Alive," he repeated calmly. "She's in intensive care. She's fragile, but she's fighting." She brought her hands to her face, sobbing, and the tears began to fall uncontrollably. My God, Thank you. Andres remained silent, respecting those tears that came from deep within, tears full of guilt, relief, and fear. Rosa bent over the bed, clutching the sheets tightly as if she wanted to hold life in her hands. I knew it, she said between sobs. I felt she was alive. I knew it. He just nodded, watching as the woman collapsed inside. Something also stirred in him, an old memory, the face of a girl he could not save, but he swallowed his emotion and kept his voice steady. She's strong, he said, very firmly. Rosa. She took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. The tears kept falling, but her gaze was different, heavy, but clear. Doctor, she began, her voice breaking. There's something you need to know. Andres moved a little closer, his expression attentive. Tell me, Doña Rosa. She looked up at the ceiling as if seeking courage there. Her mouth trembled. It was him, she whispered. It was Miguel. Miguel, your husband. She nodded, her face full of pain. I tried to stop him, doctor. I swear to God, I tried. The tears came back even stronger, but he lost his mind. Andres said nothing, letting her speak at her own pace. Miguel continued. He wasn't Lucia's real father. The girl was another man's. I met Miguel later, when she was still a baby. He always said he loved her like his own daughter, and at first I believed him. She paused for a moment, gasping for air, but then he started drinking, and everything changed. He came home late, things. He yelled at me, his voice trembling, and when he lost control, he also hit her. Andres closed his eyes for a moment, a lump forming in his throat. I should have left earlier, Rosa continued, crying. I thought about it many times, but he threatened me, saying that if I left, he would take her with him. I was afraid and ashamed. The words came out in pieces between sobs and short breaths. That night, he said in a whisper, he came home drunk. I was in the kitchen. Lucia was playing with a glass of juice at the table. She turned around quickly and the glass fell to the floor and broke. She stopped, closing her eyes tightly as if she wanted to erase the image. He yelled at her. I yelled at him. Then he pushed the girl. Her voice faded away and turned into a moan. She fell down the stairs. Andres put his hand to his mouth in surprise, but said nothing. I ran. Rosa continued, almost out of breath. She was lying still, and he stood there looking at her, not knowing what to do. Then he began to cry, to despair. He said, "It was an accident. It was an accident!" And I could only scream her name. The tears fell without stopping. He pushed me, grabbed the girl in his arms, saying he would take her to the hospital. He got in the car, and then the room fell silent, only the sound of the machines. Andres took a deep breath, trying to stay calm, and then asked in a low voice, "After I woke up, they told me that the car had crashed on the highway." He wiped his face with trembling hands. I thought they had both died. The final words came out almost in a whisper. Andres lowered his head, his eyes filled with tears. Everything made sense now. Every piece stayed there, holding her hand in silence, unable to let go. Rosa looked at him exhausted, her face swollen from crying so much. "I just want her back, doctor," he said softly. "I don't want anything else. If God lets her live, I'll endure any punishment." Andres took a deep breath, his eyes filled with tears. "She's fighting, and so are you." Rosa looked at the ceiling, her lips trembling. "May he have mercy on us." The beep of the monitor continued to mark the time. Each sound was like a heartbeat of faith in the midst of despair. Andres stood there without saying anything else, just holding that fragile hand as the sun began to rise outside, timidly trying to enter through the window. The room fell silent after Rosa finished speaking. Her words still floated in the air, heavy with pain. Andres remained seated beside her, with his hands clasped and his eyes downcast. The sound of the heart monitor was the only thing alive at that moment. A constant, insistent beep. He looked at the floor, trying to control what he was feeling inside. Something was squeezing his chest, an old memory he always tried to bury. Tears burned in his eyes, but he remained steadfast, breathing deeply. Rosa dried her face with trembling hands. She was exhausted. Her body felt empty, as if everything had been taken out of her. But there was also a deep shame, the kind of pain that cannot be shouted out because it comes with guilt. "I should have done something sooner," she murmured. not having the courage to look at him. I should have left. I should have protected her. Andres slowly raised his eyes and looked at this broken woman, trying to put the pieces back together. He wanted to say something, but his voice wouldn't come out. So he took a deep breath, leaned forward slightly, and spoke softly. "You tried." Rosa looked at him in surprise. "What? You tried?" he repeated calmly. "I saw it in your eyes. You fought as hard as he could." She shook her head, crying. "I failed, doctor. I should have saved her. I should have done more." Andres squeezed her hand gently, his voice breaking. "Rosa, don't say that. It wasn't your fault. Violence doesn't come from those who love." She looked at him with eyes full of tears. "But I stayed. I endured everything in silence. I saw the fear in my daughter's eyes, and my voice broke and I couldn't speak. I was afraid him hurting us." Andres was silent for a moment, just breathing with her, letting the weight of what had been said settle in the air. When he finally spoke, his voice was low but firm. "Fear is also a wound, Rosa, and wounds are not chosen." But he paused, searching for the words. "Now is the time to protect what is left." She looked at him, confused. "What is left?" Andres looked at the floor, and then at her tenderly. "You and the love that you still carry inside." Those words pierced her pink chest. She covered her face with her hands, her body trembling, and began to cry again. But it was a different kind of crying, softer, as if something, however small, had been released. Andres leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes for a moment. His heart ached. An old memory returned to his mind, the sound of little laughter, a little girl running around the house, a father spoken of in a sweet voice, and then the silence, the memory of the accident, the mistake of a distracted driver, the guilt that still accompanied him. He blinked, trying to erase the image, but he couldn't. The memory of his lost daughter mingled with the face of the girl, now fighting for her life in the hospital. The same size, the same age, the same innocence. He felt a lump in his throat, and, for the first time in a long time, he let a tear fall. Rosa noticed. "You also lost someone, right?" she asked gently. Andres took a long time to answer. "Yes," he said finally. "My daughter was 8 years old." "My God," Rosa said, putting her hand to her mouth. "I'm so sorry." "There's no need," he replied, taking a deep breath. "It was a long time ago." "Someone, didn't you?" Andres was slow to respond. "Yes," he said finally. "My daughter was 8 years old. She died from an incurable disease. It happened a long time ago, but some pains never truly fade. You just learn to live with them." Rosa put her hand to her mouth. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. He took a deep breath, his voice calm but heavy. "Don't be. She taught me how to fight for life." There was a silence of the soul there, a kind of understanding that only those who have suffered can share. "Andres." He wiped his face with the back of his hand and stood up slowly. "I'll let her rest a little before leaving." He looked at her once more and said in a calm, firm voice, "It's not your fault, Rosa. What happened doesn't erase the love you gave her, and that love is what will save you both now." Rosa closed her eyes, crying softly. "Thank you, Dr. Andres." Andres left the room and stood in the hallway, leaning against the wall. His heart felt heavy, but with a new sense of purpose, he took a deep breath and walked toward the elevator. Hours later, in the early morning, the silence of the morgue felt denser than ever. Andres entered slowly, as if stepping into a sacred place. The white light reflected off the metal trays, the lined sheets, the closed cabinets. The sound of the clock was the only thing that could be heard. A new stretcher was near the door, with a body covered with a clean sheet. Andres approached, took the file tied to the foot of the bed, and read slowly. Name, Miguel Herrera. Age 38. Cause of death, head trauma. The air suddenly became heavy. He read the name again, as if to convince himself. Miguel Herrera. The same surname, the same fate. The cold body, the cross in the pocket of the uniform. The cruel irony of life showing its face again. "It's the same man," he murmured in a trembling voice. Silence answered for him. Andres stood there staring at the white sheet, the still body. He felt a strange mixture of courage and pity, compassion and rage. With slow hands, he pulled the sheet down to the man's face. The face was beaten, the forehead open, marked with signs of despair. Andres took a deep breath, ran his hand through his gray hair, and covered him again. "May God forgive you, Miguel," he said, in a low voice, almost like a prayer. She survived. She closed her eyes and remained silent for a few seconds until the distant sound of thunder broke the air. It was starting to rain outside. Andres turned around, walked to the sink, washed his hands slowly, and stood watching the water run. That was the end of one life and perhaps the beginning of the repair of another. The sound of the rain grew louder. Each drop falling outside seemed to say the same thing. There are pains that cannot be erased, but you can learn to forgive. The early morning was heavy, as if the whole hospital were breathing with difficulty. The lights in the ICU flickered slightly. The constant sound of the machines filled the air, that beep-beep, that for those who work there is a sign of hope. Andres was sitting on a bench in the hallway, exhausted, his head in his hands. He hadn't slept for hours. The image of Rosa and the memory of the silent girl kept spinning around in his head, like a movie that wouldn't stop. Suddenly, the sound that everyone fears broke the air, the long, desperate, continuous beep. Andres jumped up. His heart seemed to stop too. The ICU door opened and a nurse shouted, "Cardiac arrest! It's the girl in bed 3. Andres ran, his gown moving with him. The scene in front of him seemed to be in slow motion. The nurses exchanged glances. Lucia's small body lay motionless on the bed. The monitor showed a straight line. "Charged and ready," someone said. Andres approached with a firm voice but a trembling gaze. "Step back now." The sound of the defibrillator broke the silence. His body jumped a little. The monitor flickered indecisively, then returned to the same continuous beep. Nothing. Andres took a deep breath. His hands were sweaty, but his medical instinct as a doctor spoke louder than his fear. He placed his palm on the little girl's chest and closed his eyes for a second. "Come on, Lucia," he whispered. "Don't do this to me, little one." He looked at the nurses with a firm voice. "Press now." One of them began the rhythmic movement on the girl's chest. Andres looked at the monitor, her heart beating at the same rhythm as the compressions, the sound of air entering through the tube, the smell of alcohol, the despair in their eyes. Everything mixed together in a single silent plea. "Come back." The seconds passed slowly. 20, 30, 40 compressions. Again, charge. No shout. "Andres, come on." The sound of the defibrillator was heard again. The fragile body reacted. The cables moved. Everyone held their breath. The monitor flashed once, twice, then returned to a straight line. Andres felt his chest close up. A heavy silence filled the room. The nurse looked at him with eyes full of tears. "Doctor," but Andres raised his hand asking for more time. His voice came out hoarse but full of faith. "Not yet. She hasn't finished fighting." He moved closer to the bed. His hands were shaking, but he kept a firm touch on her chest. His palm felt the heat disappearing, and that hurt him more than anything else. Andres said softly, almost in a whisper, "I saw you fight. Fight again. Please. Your mom is waiting for you. She needs you." Her face contorted, and a tear fell. "Fight, little one," she cried with a heavy heart. "Your mom is waiting for you." And it was as if the entire universe held its breath with him for an instant. Nothing existed, except that dense silence, filled with faith. Suddenly, the monitor made a low sound, a faint beep, then another, and another. "Wait," said the surprised nurse. "He's coming back." Andres's eyes opened. The rhythm returned little by little, irregular like a melody seeking to start again. "Come on, Lucia. It's still going," he murmured, almost crying. His chest rose slightly, with a short but real breath. The monitor now showed a live line, still weak, but alive. Andres exhaled the air he seemed to have been holding for centuries. He ran his hand over his face, sweating and crying at the same time. "She's back," he said, not believing it. The nurses began to adjust the machines, one of them whispering, "Thank God." The air began to move again in the room, and the weight began to disappear. At that moment, the door opened, and Rosa appeared in the doorway, staggering, her face pale, her gaze lost. She was out of breath, as if she had run through the entire hospital. "My daughter!" she cried. "Where is my daughter?" Andres turned quickly. "Rosa, Calm down. She's here, he said, pointing to the bed. She's alive. Rosa ran to the girl and stopped at side, her body trembling. She covered her mouth with her hands and cried loudly, her chest breaking. "Lucia, my love," she said between sobs. "Oh, Mommy, she's here. She's here, my angel." She took her daughter's little hand and put it against her face. It was warm, real. Rosa knelt down, resting her forehead on the edge of the bed, crying as if giving thanks for a miracle. Andres remained silent, watching the scene. It was simple, but it had something sacred, a mother embracing the love that life had almost taken from her. Rosa looked up, still crying, and whispered close to her daughter's ear, "You are stronger than pain, my love, much stronger." The monitor continued its rhythm, a calm, beautiful beep, as if playing along with the mother's crying. The sound of the machines and the sound of tears mixed together like a soft song, the melody of life returning from rewarded faith. Andres turned his face for a moment, trying to hold back his own tears. He looked up and murmured something softly, almost a prayer that only he understood. And there, in that cold dawn, between the sound of the machines and the smell of alcohol, the impossible had happened. Lucia was breathing, and the hearts of everyone in that room were beating along with hers. Morning crept slowly in through the window, as if it didn't want to scare anyone. The white curtain moved slightly. The room smelled of soap and old flowers that someone had left in a glass. The machines made a soft, beeping sound, like a heart that had learned to rest. The sheet covered the little body. The air had a beautiful silence, the kind that makes you want to speak softly. Rosa was sitting next to the bed with her hands on her daughter's. Her tired fingers caressed the back of her little hand in a slow, unhurried motion. Sometimes she closed her eyes and just breathed. Other times she rested her forehead on the edge of the bed and said, "I'm here," almost without sound. Her face still had marks, but her eyes were different, full of wood light. Andres entered quietly and paused at the door for a moment, as if asking love for permission. He looked at the monitors, confirmed the numbers, adjusted a button, then another. He approached. His gown smelled of alcohol and cold coffee. He smiled a little, a short but sincere smile. It was then that Lucia's eyelashes fluttered, first once, almost imperceptibly, then again. Her eyelid opened slowly, as if the world were too heavy to look at all at once. Her large eyes remained lost on the ceiling for a moment, learning to see again. The light entered from the side and shone like pink water. She held her breath, her fingers clenching the girl's hand. Lucia came out in a sigh. "My love." The girl turned her face slowly, as if waking from a long dream. She searched for her voice, found it, saw her mother's face, and tried to smile, but the smile was small, broken, beautiful, a corner of her mouth that said, "I'm back." Andres took a careful step forward, without rushing, and crouched down a little to be at her height. "Hello, Lucia," he said softly. "Do you remember me?" She blinked slowly, tired. She looked at his face, his uncombed hair, his kind eyes. She nodded slightly, almost like the wind. Her voice came out very low, hoarse but complete. "You're the doctor." He smiled, closing his eyes for a second, relieved. "Yes, it's me, Andres." Lucia swallowed, feeling a strange sensation in her throat. She looked at her mother, and then back at him, as if seeking certainty. "The bad man is gone now." The room grew even quieter. Rosa removed her hand to wipe away a tear, but immediately put it back as if afraid to let go. Andres took a deep breath. He was in no hurry to answer. He knew that sometimes the truth needs a pause to fit. "Yes, he's gone," he said softly but firmly. "Now there is only love here." The girl closed her eyes for a moment, as if listening to a song she had waited a long time for. Her body relaxed a little. Her chest rose and fell slowly. She turned to her mother. "Mom." Rosa couldn't hold back her tears. The tears fell hot, washing everything away. She rested her face on her daughter's hand, wetting her small fingers. "I'm here, my love. I'm here," she repeated between soft sobs. "I'll never let you go again." Andres placed his open hand on the sheet over the girl's heart, just to feel its rhythm. It was still weak, but it was still there. He nodded stubbornly, as if talking to something invisible, and stepped back a little, giving space to the two of them. Lucia looked at her mother again, as if wanting to memorize her face. Her gaze wandered around the room, the window letting in a calm light, the dancing curtain, the flowers in the vase, the doctor's gown, a crooked drawing of a sun stuck on the wall by someone too yellow, too happy. The girl took a deep breath. "It hurts a little," she whispered. "I know, my love," replied Rosa, stroking her hair, "but it will pass. I'm here. I'm staying, Andres." She adjusted the pillow and raised the headboard slightly with slow movements, so as not to scare her. She took a piece of gauze and moistened her lips carefully, as if caring for something very precious. "Slowly," she said. "If you get tired, close your eyes. We'll wait for you." Lucia nodded. Her eyes never left her mother's face. She wanted to raise her hand, but she didn't have the strength. Rosa understood without her saying anything. She took her little hand and placed it on her own chest, right where her heart was beating. "Listen," she said, crying and laughing at the same time. "This is your place." The girl slowly let her head fall to the side, listening to her mother's heartbeat. Her face relaxed. The beep of the monitor continued calmly, as if playing along with it. Outside, a little bird dared to sing timidly. The curtain moved, and the light made a warm path on the floor. "Doctor?" Lucia called without looking up. Her mother. "I'm here," Andres replied, approaching her. "Thank you." It took her a second to answer, as if she needed to hide a tear. "I'm the one who should be thanking you, little Rose." She looked at him, and in that look was everything that could not be said. Fear, gratitude, exhaustion, faith. He responded with an almost invisible gesture, as if to say, "Don't worry." Lucia tried to smile again. It wasn't a big smile. It wasn't necessary. It was a little sun rising after a very long night, a tired, crooked smile. Rosa rested her forehead on hers and closed her eyes. "Rest, my love. Mom is here." The room was left with only the soft sound of the machines and the girl's light breathing. The light caressed the walls carefully, and for a few moments, the outside world did not exist. Only that existed. A girl with her eyes open, a mother who was finally breathing without guilt, and a doctor standing there in silence listening to the miracle unfold. Time passed slowly, like someone learning to walk again. The warm wind from the interior brought the smell of baked bread and wet earth after the rain. The simple house had colorful curtains and a small yard full of flowers that Rosa planted with her own hands. Lucia ran around laughing, her hair flowing in the sun. She still limped a little, but each step was a complete miracle. Slowly, Lucia shouted, "Rosa!" from the terrace, laughing. "Be careful, don't fall. I know how to walk, Mom," I replied with that mischievous tone that only girls who have returned from the edge of the impossible have. Sometimes Rosa would stop what she was doing just to look, to watch, and breathe, because there were days when she still woke up in the middle of the night, sweating, believing that it had all been a dream. But just hearing her daughter's laughter of her daughter in the other room, she believed again. The sun was beginning to hide behind the mountains when they took a photo together. Rosa hugging her daughter, both smiling, their faces illuminated by the orange light. Lucia insisted on writing something on the back of the photo in her crooked, pretty little girl handwriting. "Thank you for giving me a second life." Rosa kissed the girl's forehead and put the photo in an envelope. "Who is it for?" "For an angel in a gown," replied the mother, her eyes filled with tears. Days later, far away, the mailman delivered a crumpled envelope to the hospital. Andres received it in the middle of a quiet shift. He opened it carefully. Inside fell the photo of Rosa and Lucia smiling at sunset, full of life. Behind it was the phrase written in a child's handwriting. He read it slowly, his voice trembling. He ran his thumb over the paper as if he could touch that smile. He closed his eyes. The silence in the room seemed to embrace him. He reached into the inside pocket of his gown and took out the silver necklace with the small cross, engraved with the name Lucia. He stared at it for a while. The cold metal warmed between his fingers. Camila murmured, looking at the ceiling, "I think I've finally learned how to save someone." A tear fell slowly, without haste. She pressed the necklace against her chest, feeling his heart beat strongly, calmly, as he hadn't felt in a long time. He remained there, still, with a slight smile, tired, but at peace. The evening light streamed in through the window, painting everything golden. The distant sound of a girl laughing outside seemed to answer the silence. The wind moved the papers on the table. The necklace shone a little brighter, and he understood without needing to say it out loud. Sometimes the miracle is not in survival, but in being able to forgive life, others, and oneself. If this story touched your heart, tell me in the comments what you would do if you were in Dr. Andres's place, or if you were Rosa. Could you forgive the past? I would love to read your response.